with City Manager Brian Johnson, and we'll be getting to him in a moment. I just want to be able to thank our lead sponsor, Roadway Fiber. They're an IT fiber optic company that provides services, fast internet connectivity to businesses in the communities that they are in. They're a big Southeast company. They're here in Peachtree Corners. They're involved with Technology Park, with Curiosity Lab at Peachtree Corners, and with the city, doing a lot of work with local businesses as well. So if you're looking for fast internet connectivity, a partner that can provide office tools as well, so then your in-office people and your at-home work, teleworking people can work together, they're the company to check out. So go to hogwayfiber.com and you'll be able to find out more information about our lead sponsor. So let's, and I want to thank them for being with us. Let's go. And Brian, thank you for joining us. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's always good to be able to catch up, seeing what's going on in the city, and finding out, picking your brain and just seeing what the master knows about what's going on in the city of Peachtree Corners, because God knows the city manager is involved in all sorts of things. And then and of course it's so big, the city, that really at 47,000 people, or 44,000, somewhere around there, right? That it's almost like playing telephone sometimes. People get information, goes from one place to another, and it changes for some reason. Maybe it's not accurate. Maybe it didn't start that way. So I'm glad that we can do this.
You would be surprised at some of the humorous stuff I get that comes back around to me, and it'll be a resident telling me, not asking me, telling me about things that are going on that city government is involved in, when I'm actually the one responsible for what city government does. But they'll be telling me, oh yeah, no, I mean, city manager, you're wrong. I'm right. I heard it. So yeah,
That's
interesting.
funny. Yeah, it's just, so I'm glad that we get to do this. So we're going to be discussing a bunch of different things, including the pedestrian bridge, the Redevelopment Authority, the hurricane, what cities learned from it, grants that are going to small businesses in the city of Peachtree Corners, and a few other things from the city council, recent city council meeting, just to let the audience know where we're going. So the first thing that we should talk about, and just, we talk about this almost every episode, but I think we are finally there. The bridge will be opening, and we're talking about the pedestrian bridge at this point. So why don't you give us a rundown, and as you're giving us that rundown, I'm going to throw some pictures up as well, that we had drone shots from a friend of mine, Peter Chen, that's out there, and he's a foodie and drone fanatic, so he's donated some pictures to us to use. But tell us about the bridge. Where are we going? When is this opening?
All right, so we did just announce that on November 18th, the bridge will be open to the public. The November 18th date is, technically 6 weeks after we wanted to open it. Now, we could have opened the bridge even a week or 10 days ago, but we would not have had the elevators operating. And so we didn't want to open it without those, being able to operate. And we also did not want, we wanted to take an opportunity on some of the cosmetic things that we could do out at the bridge. So we just put it to November 18th. And I know that there has been talk, so we went into this as October 1 being the date we wanted to open. It is a little bit later. The reason for that is a couple things. And I want to, lead by saying the bridge is not over budget. It was a lump sum contract, and the contractor, that won the bid, was paid the amount that they bid on it. Any delays that we have had have not been an additional cost per se to the city. Some of the delays have been COVID related. Some of the delays have been regulatory related. Because you got to remember, this is a bridge that's being built on and over a state route. So the state of Georgia had to approve a bunch of the stuff related to the bridge. And then the state also a different office had to approve the elevator. The insurance commissioner's office, and the elevator is a whole different animal than, just the bridge. And so you had all that. And then we did have a few um, issues with the precision cut panels at the very edges of the bridge. Probably people remember seeing the panels going up and then they stopped.
Right.
Looked like it was about 2 panels short of all the way across. And there was a precision cutting challenge that was that arose as the arch came down back over the panels, and so some of them had to be recut. And even the supply chain and COVID makes, and I think any of us who have ordered something on Amazon or whatever know that right now things are not shipping as fast as they used to. They're not getting made as fast as they had, and so all of those things were, pretty common when it comes to construction project. So we did that. We also worked out a deal with the forum to ensure that we got the steps leading down from the bridge to go down into the forum, so that you actually have a pedestrian walkway down into there. Okay. So those were some things that we did that we took advantage of while we had this, call it 6-week postponement of the opening, but it has come in, on budget, and we're excited for it to open. And then we, of course, have already oriented our main focus on the extension of the bridge through the creek that runs, right along the town center, right along the parking deck and everything. And we're extending the multi-use trail connection from the bridge up from there all the way up to Peachtree Corner Circle. So we've already started the design of that. So you'll be able to both walk up at the top of the creek, right there along the parking deck, the outside of the parking deck, or there'll be an opportunity to walk down into the creek, along the creek, down at the creek bed. And so we've already oriented our focus down there. So we're excited about doing this and being able to, remove the pedestrian crossing at grade down there and make people go and use the bridge. And so cars should be stopped for shorter periods of time at the town center Forum Drive signal. Right. That'll help. It'll be safer. It's an exciting time.
Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad to see that it's actually coming to fruition and getting to be open and used. And I'm sure, when we get to next year with summer and festivals going on, God willing, we're going to see a lot of people crossing that bridge, going to both shopping areas, right? So that'll be great.
It also is, the one last thing too. I'll add 2 more things. One, on the 18th, we'll also have the bridge lit, at night from then on. We haven't lit it yet. It could be, but we don't want to turn it on and give people the impression that it is open.
Right.
And then the second thing is aside from using it to cross a very, heavily traveled roadway, people, at least most people, like to have unique elevated vantage points about things. And I've been up there, and there are just cool places to just, be at an elevated position and look down over the forum or the town center or some of the traffic. It's just kind of cool to be able to have that, opportunity to do it. And so, I think, people should like to use it, and we hope it becomes a popular and well-used amenity.
Yeah, I think it'll become an iconic piece of the city, right? When someone thinks of Peachtree Corners, it's more than the forum, let's say. I mean, everything's there's certain iconic things in this city, right? But not as many things as one might see in an older city. So that'll be cool. And since you mentioned the trails and stuff, it just hit me that we had done a photo shoot on the fitness trail just off town center. And I had met up with, had seen Alex Wright there, city councilman. He was exercising there with his group of guys and girls. They were doing fitness exercise boot camp style over there. And I saw a couple of parents with their kids there as well. Is that officially opened, by the way? Or because, I mean, I know it's being used because it's not closed off, and there are fitness pieces there to be used, and people are climbing them and stuff. So I was just curious, is that quote officially open at this point?
I mean, yeah, for all intents and purposes, yes. And the reason I don't just say yes and then we move on is because it's important to note a couple of things. One is that is a fitness area.
Mm-hmm.
The improvements, the appurtenances out there are for fitness. It's not a playground. And there's a very, important distinction between a playground and fitness equipment or amenities.
Right.
And so we are getting close to having all of the final public, if you want to call it disclaimers, warnings
Yes.
about
Mm-hmm.
the fact that it is to be used for fitness, not for recreation. And so we have been, call it safety proofing some of this stuff of late. We have through one of the area Boy Scout troops who have done a really good job of helping us. We have added landing areas, with sandbag some of the areas that if you're in an elevated position, like you're climbing a rope or you're on, monkey bars, and then you need to drop, that we've created soft landing places and removed, things that could be safety risk. And we have signage that's been put up on how to properly use it. The final sign is going to be kind of the disclaimer of, hey, this is for use for fitness. It shouldn't be used without adult supervision. Mm-hmm. Or with anybody who's under the age of 13 without an adult there. And we're going to actually have a QR code, mm-hmm. And you could take your phone and pull up on the QR code for each station. There will be a live demonstration on how to properly do some of that stuff.
Really?
Oh, so that's getting taped. I believe it's next week.
Cool.
And Alex Wright, one of our council members, has really been the impetus for this. He brought up this idea when we were all in, the shelter in place mode of the pandemic, and he had a group of people that he would get together with at the YMCA.
Yeah.
And when the YMCA closed, they had to find somewhere to go, and so they went out to the town green, and they were doing the best they can. But he asked me one day if maybe we could put a pull-up bar in the wood line there, even if it was just kind of temporary, and then, maybe some other stuff. And it just kind of blossomed, from there, and it became the amenity that it is. And it's a pretty cool amenity.
It is. Walking through that and seeing the climbing ropes, the climbing wall, a bunch of different things there, which is kind of cool. I think it'll get people, they were doing it there that the day we were doing the cover shot for the magazine. So it was kind of neat to be able to see them running through it and doing all those fitness pieces. All right, let's move along to, I know the Redevelopment Authority has gone over probably 24 or more applications for people that want to be on that authority. Can you, when is that going to be finalized? How are the people going to be picked, and how many people again on that authority?
So we got around, I think, just under 30 applicants.
30. Okay.
Really good ones. People who, it was a really good kind of snapshot of the community. They were, residents of Peachtree Corners. They lived all over the city. We had a good mix of, gender and ethnicity and professional pedigree. And so a committee was formed, and it took those applicants and it culled them down through 2 different iterations of discussions. They culled the list down to about, I want to say 9, at least. In the 9 individuals have been interviewed or are being interviewed, and I believe the last interviews of applicants is happening this coming Monday.
Okay.
And at that point, the committee is going to provide its recommendation to council for formal seating of the board. I think you're probably going to look at, if I had to guess, it would be 7 members. It's either going to be 7 or 9. If I had to guess, it would be 7. And so, that based on the committee's, there was a lot of consideration of things like we didn't want it to be a homogenous board, of just a bunch of, older white men or something like that. We wanted to make sure we were diverse in geography within the city, diverse of, again, profession, diverse of gender, diverse of, diversity of ethnicity. And so I think we got, bottom line is we got really good candidates, a good pool of candidates to pull from. And so I was very pleased to look at the resumes that were submitted. I think we're gonna have a great board. And we're ready. The city's ready for them to get to work. We've got lots of things that we want them to start looking into, and so I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so am I. I mean, there's a lot of areas in the city that can use redevelopment work, and I like the idea of diversity, not only geography but in ethnicity. I think that just brings that all around, and the ability to be more creative when you're diverse, right? So different points of views and such. Hurricane. We've had that power outage this past Hurricane Zeta that came through for I think it was, in some places it was 36 hours or more power outage. I know we felt it for about a day and a half to 2 days until the power was back up. Did the city learn anything from this, and what are they looking at doing? I know you met with some people the other day, so can you fill us in what's going on there?
So coincidentally enough, even before this hurricane came through, we had scheduled a meeting the city had with senior Georgia Power representatives to discuss what both some of the residents of the city had raised and really with some of us within the city government itself had observed firsthand. And that is, there seemed to be a little bit more an increase in power outages within the city over the last couple of years. That there seemed to be going out, seemed to be a increasingly consistent amount of time. And we're not talking about a couple minutes, we're talking about like 4+ hours, and in times where we didn't necessarily have hurricane level winds. And so Georgia Power had started to look into it. And so yesterday's meeting was a culmination of a bunch of communication and some prep by Georgia Power prior to the meeting. And again, it was to discuss what is at play within the city. Is in fact there an increase in power outages, and what's Georgia Power doing about it? Now, I'll start by talking about Hurricane Zeta specifically, and that is, they admitted, and I think they have actually in a press release of some sort, but there was, if I remember, they said that this had the second most power outages across their service area of any event over the last 25 years. So they got hit really hard in general. And then they were saying that with the swath of the winds having pushed over, so it created so many problems with power outages in neighboring states, they didn't have as many, private sector partners that they could bring in, or other utility companies to bring in, because they were working on their own problems. Like, Alabama Power had their own issues, Gulf Power and, Duke Energy and, these neighboring ones, they had their own problems. And so they admitted that they had a less workforce to deal with. There was some pandemic, issues also that has created. And then they didn't help themselves. And I know I specifically felt some frustration. Is there was I don't know if you want to say a release, there was information that was sent out through their outage map that was not meant to go on their outage map. It was really meant to go to the press, and it was meant to apply to the entire customer base. And the information was, if anybody was watching the outage map where their address was at and the status of when Georgia Power thought that power was going to be restored, we all got the same message at the same time, which was Sunday night at 11 p.m.
Right, November 1st. 4 days later, 3 days later?
Correct, 4 days later. And of course, people were like, you have got to be kidding me.
Right.
And that message, Georgia Power said, was supposed to be for the press to tell them that that's when Georgia Power thought that they would have power returned to every customer that they have, right, not any particular area. But because that message went out, and because as customers we didn't know that, and by their own admission, that kind of, that was a screw up on their part, if you will. There's a lot of people who it made it worse. I know there was a run on ice. So when that came out,
yes,
my wife said, on your way home, because actually City Hall had power, and so on my way home, I believe it was Thursday night. She was like, get some ice because we're gonna not trying to not lose a bunch of food. You couldn't find ice anywhere. Publix, Ingles were out, Racetrack, Quick Trip. Yep. They're all out of ice because everybody made a run on ice. So anyway, there's a long way of saying that from there was a unique set of events that we did kind of suffer from. Now, prior to that, or even subsequent to that, we had a conversation about power outages in the city. And what I do know is this. Georgia Power has, so trees are generally the single, biggest reason why power goes out outside of a major storm like a hurricane. Just for different reasons, a limb will fall on something, a tree will fall over. Sometimes it could be a car accident, it hits something or whatever, but it's usually trees. And so Georgia Power has a very specific program that has two components to it. One is every 3 years they have a crew that goes through and they go through their overhead power line corridors and they remove all of the limbs that are posing a risk to the power lines. They do that in swaths. Like they go through and they just basically limb up everything.
Right.
Then they have a sub component to that program, and I think they call it find and fix, and that is they have a smaller group that goes through on a more frequent basis looking for more egregious, more surgical, like that particular limb needs to be moved
right
now, versus let's just take a big crew and go down and just limb up everything. So they do recognize that trees are a growing problem in our city because our tree canopy is becoming, is very mature, and it poses a threat. They, as a result of that, we have been placed on what they call the Grid Improvement Program, and it is a program that Georgia Power has to harden their distribution amenities, their distribution lines, and that's mostly to bury lines. There are other aspects of it. For instance, there's technology they're putting out there to allow for automatic rerouting of power if you're like in a loop system and something happens here, you can still get electricity, from another way. And they used to have a lineman go out and actually flip a switch and all this kind of stuff. Now they have automatic, rerouting, so they don't have to actually send somebody out. They're changing some of that. They're also doing some of their arms are steel, and they're replacing them with fiberglass because steel tends to attract lightning strikes, and that weakens them. And so it's just a hardening of their distribution. And so at the end of the day, they recognize that, a mature tree canopy poses a problem.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to do what they can with both their tree removal, or it's really more limbs. They're limbing up trees and hardening of burying of lines when they can. And so that really, at the end of the day, is where their message is.
And the interesting part is the tree that fell on the line that took out the power for 36 odd hours was about 20 feet back or something off the road. So it wouldn't have been something that they would have been able to
Correct.
to trim back or anything. It's more of
And
an arborist.
Well, you bring up a good point, Rico, and that is, remember what Georgia Power is doing is they are removing limbs
Right.
that are posing a threat by overhanging power lines. What they can't do, because they don't have the authority to, is that let's say your backyard or front yard had a tree in it that was 30 feet away from their power lines, but your tree was 70 feet tall. They may look at that tree and be like, you know what, we don't like that tree. It's growing at an angle, or it doesn't look healthy. And they could approach you and say, Mr. Figliolini, will you remove that tree? And you could say, no, I don't want to. I like it. It's not dying, or
it's going
pay for it.
Right, it's going to cost me $1,500 to remove a 50-foot tree. I was just like,
correct. So Georgia Power doesn't have that authority. That homeowner may not want to do it, and so it's not as simple as all of us would like.
Yeah.
But it unfortunately is the downside of living in an area that has a mature tree canopy with above ground power.
Now, are they going to? I know some municipalities. I mean, we're a mature city to a degree. There's not a lot of vacant land to build in anymore, right?
Right.
Otherwise, rezonings can recommend that power be put underground when they're approved. This way they're not running lines, at least within the property area. Powers are underground versus above ground. So there are things that a city or a county can do to recommend for certain things like that. Would there be plans at some point? I can't imagine, though, to put all the power lines, let's say, along West Jones Bridge Road underground?
Yeah, that is part of the grid improvement plan that Georgia Power has, is when it makes sense is to bury it. Now, you got to understand a couple things, and that is, we actually have more buried power lines in the city than people would think, but they tend to be like in the subdivisions when they were built. Like, for instance, I live in Riverfield. All of the power, once it came into the main entrance, is all buried.
Right.
I was still without power all day Thursday and Friday until late Friday night because the power getting to the front of our subdivision had a break. I think you were in the same boat.
Yeah, it's the same circuit.
Yep. And so yes, burying lines on East Jones, Jones Bridge Circle, West Jones are certainly in that part of that grid improvement program. One other thing to consider, though, is that is not the end-all be-all, meaning there's always going to be a threat. So, for instance, in a neighborhood, we see this through other buried stuff. How many times have you been all of a sudden without the internet, only to find out that the cable company was burying new lines and they accidentally hit your cable provider's, line?
Right. Yeah.
We have it here in Tech Park. Technology Park does not have overhead lines, but we lose things like power or internet quite a bit because there's a lot of buried stuff that people are messing with, including water and sewer, stormwater, and then you got fiber optic, you got telephone,
it seems to me crazy that I see all these painted lines on the lawns in the street because people are trying to figure out where these lines are before they put their lines in. What I don't understand is why there can't be just a 1-foot pipe that everyone puts their lines through. This way it's one place, you pull that line out if you don't want it, you put another line in. Why are we constantly ripping things up and doing things different?
Well, there is a problem with that because if you think about it, you've got minimum distances that some of these have to be apart from one another. For instance, you wouldn't want the electric line and the gas line to be in close proximity to one another.
I get that. I understand.
So, there's a few of them. Now, telecommunications does sometimes share.
Yeah.
And in Curiosity Lab, the fiber optic, the conduit we have for fiber optic has a number of communication lines that share it.
Okay.
But that's one problem. And the other one is just it takes time. I mean, there is better organization. There's also location like copper filament that is placed on the top of lines so you can find exactly where it is. But some of the older ones, we just had a stormwater upgrade project in Neely Farm, a subdivision that has everything buried also. We did locates, and Atlanta Gas Light, AGL, did not know. They told us that there was no gas that they were aware of in the location. We were like, that doesn't make sense because that's how they're getting their, their stoves.
Yeah.
So we did a couple of test bores and actually found their line that they didn't know was there. And that was not a particularly good one to accidentally hit as a gas line. But it was buried a really long time ago and it wasn't properly marked and it was older location technology. And so it happens. It's frustrating. But anyway, Georgia Power does recognize that electricity is important. Underground is better than overhead. And there is a program, I want to say it's a $10 billion statewide program for them to harden their infrastructure. And so we are on the list of ones that, are having more problems than normal. And so, it's almost like street resurfacing. There is an equation in a spreadsheet of this money, where does it go first? And it's going to the community that's having the most issues with power outages due to stuff, and then it'll work to us when it's time. Okay,
fair enough. With COVID still working its way through and businesses still having to deal with the realities of doing business or not doing business because of COVID, or adjusting how they're doing business because maybe they can't do or they don't have the money to do in dining and they're still doing drive-through maybe or curbside delivery. But businesses are suffering, and I know that there's a CARES grant program that the city is helping to facilitate that's about $2.5 to $3 million, and there are people applying for it or businesses applying for it. So give us in a quick way some details of what type of business can apply for this, and is there minimum, maximum, and what they have to show to be able to qualify for the grant, which is not a loan, so they don't have to repay this back. This is a one-time grant that comes to help them because of COVID, right?
Yeah, so coincidentally, it expires today. Our grant schedule, application schedule, but we are taking about $2.5 to $3 million of the CARES Act money that came to us, and we have created a small business assistance grant for businesses that have a presence in the city that have less than 100 employees and that were affected by the pandemic in some financial way that they can validate, that they can prove. And things that are eligible would be, things like rent, utility bills, facility improvements that you made as a result of the pandemic or new rules that came down or whatever. And the purpose of it, of course, is to help, some of these companies that were severely affected by the pandemic to maybe, if nothing else, live to fight another day until maybe things, are improving. And so you have to show that you had this negative effect. Now it starts, there's kind of a, if you want to call it a prioritization of this, there are some types of industry that were really affected more than others. Like they were forced to close entirely.
Right.
And, you got ones that are forced to close entirely, like say a gym or in some cases restaurants that you couldn't, they just couldn't do anything. And then, as the sliding scale goes, you get some that were affected, but they weren't forced to close completely. Maybe a dry cleaners, something like that, where they didn't have to close completely, but then people weren't needing those kind of things as much,
Right.
so they were hurt. And so we're kind of going through that. And so at the end of the day, depending on the applicants, how many applicants we get, and we're approaching, I think, somewhere between 125 and 150 individual businesses that have applied for something. And then when you take those and we go through, and we have a committee that's going through and verifying that the documents that they provided to show us that they didn't, that this is the amount that they were affected. Depending on that amount, we'll essentially take the amount that these companies have shown that they've been affected, the number of companies, and divide it by the total grant amount, and that's how much money will be dispersed.
And since this, I guess we don't have to go into more detail since today's the deadline, but I'm assuming that'll be a public list at some point. People can see maybe, who are the businesses affected, the monies they got. I mean, it's great to see the city being able to do this and facilitate this, because certainly there's a lot of businesses that have been hurt because of COVID and the things, closing shop and all that. So
Yeah.
glad to see the city's doing that. There's a couple of other things that are transpired through the city planning, city council meeting recently, and an upcoming planning commission meeting. I just want people to be aware of, I guess. There's going to be a new business on the planning commission meeting on November 12th next week, and that's a new business requesting approval for conditions with permit to actually do pet boarding and a veterinary's office, and that's at 5075 Peachtree Parkway. I don't have a particular question to you, I just figured I'd throw that out for people to know. There is also, on the city council, there was a Medlock Bridge development that went from an R100 to an R13 townhomes. That was approved, I think, right?
It was tabled.
Tabled, okay.
Tabled till the November, I think it's, what's our council meeting date in November is the 17th.
17th.
Yep.
Third, okay. All right. So, and was that tabled for any particular reason, or?
The applicant wanted to table it because there had been some, I guess, communication between some of the local nearby residents and some, you get into the whole, somebody has a concern about certain things, and so they're going to try to resolve those before they get to council versus trying to resolve it during the meeting. It's always better to reserve it before, resolve these things before the meeting versus during.
Definitely worth it that way. There were also several second reads in consideration of a few things that had to deal with code, city code, ordinances. Anything that stood out to you that we should know about?
Most of those were water related, drainage related.
Okay.
We did, speaking of that, we did just, I think you may have seen, we're enrolled into the community rating system, which is people are aware of ISO and the ratings of fire departments.
Right.
Well, there is a similar rating for stormwater management programs that are managed by cities and counties. Instead of ISO, it's called CRS. And it's through the National Flood Insurance Program that FEMA administers. And we have successfully enrolled in that program and got a rating that would result in somebody getting a 10% discount on their flood insurance because of, and it basically is a rating on how well we manage our drainage within the city. And so that's a big deal. We are in a position where we can potentially improve our rating by one grade here within the next 6 to 9 months and get it to where people would qualify for a 20% discount on flood insurance. It's because the insurance industry, the better the score you have, the more they end up saying, you know what, that city's code and regulation as it relates to stormwater is good enough that we think the risk of flooding is less because so we can give a discount on flood insurance because, of that. Same with fire. ISO rating affects your homeowner's insurance because the better the rating, the more the insurance companies say, you know what, we don't feel like your home is at risk for, burning up.
Sure.
As much as it would be on a community that has a, higher or less, good ISO rating. So.
Right. And I don't think most people know there is a map out there. I have to find the link for it that I can put in the show notes that actually shows the flood areas. They quote flood areas in Peachtree Corners because there are flood water areas that people should know about. I know there's one in my subdivision as it goes down the hill towards the end of it near the creek. So there's that area, but the rest of it up here seems fine. So just so that people know where they are when they get these floods.
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of waterway here, and so there are a lot of special flood hazard areas. There's a lot of wetlands, a lot of stream buffer, and so the more you know, the better.
For sure. There's also contracts. Are there any? I know. I wanted to talk a little bit about the RFP that went out for the EV supply equipment. I guess there's nothing being expended on it except to approve a vendor, if we will, or vendors, however that works, that people in the community can go to, or business people or developers can go to get a pre-approved, if you will, electric charging stations or systems. So can you explain a little bit about why the city did this and how that's going to help?
So, our involvement in electric vehicle charging has, over the last couple of months, significantly increased, oftentimes because of Curiosity Lab. And in fact, you currently have Metro Atlanta's largest single electric vehicle charging hub being constructed at the town center at the parking deck right now. Wow. And by Thanksgiving, there will be 16 DC fast chargers for every type of vehicle on the road, including Tesla. Tesla's putting their own because they're proprietary.
Right.
And these are fast chargers, meaning you can charge, in some cases, you can get your car fully charged from zero in 40 minutes, as in 40 minutes at one location.
For 100% charge.
100% charge versus, some of the smaller trickle chargers that you see at home. It takes all night, type of thing. And so we're having 16 of them put in. Of course, the purpose of that is to provide a location to do this fast, but to do it at a place in the city that people could plug it in and go have a bite to eat at lunch or go do a little shopping and come back and, they're fully charged or they've at least got a lot. So we've been placed on the map, and that's going in at no cost to us, but it's going in because Curiosity Lab attracted these companies like Tesla, Electrify America, companies that do these unique fast chargers. They came to Curiosity Lab and they're like, we'd like to do some testing of some DC fast chargers, so on and so forth. When we looked at the location, we're like, the test track is not the best area to do it. Let's put it at the town center where people will be more inclined to use it because there's something for them to be entertained. Well, we got placed on, so we're kind of on the map, we're on the radar screen of the EV charging industry. We also have, getting ready to go live in about a week or so, the first place in North America that there is a solar field in the roadway. There's a solar roadway connected to an EV charging station right here in front of City Hall. And it's the first place in North America where a solar roadway is connected to an electric vehicle charging station and is segregated from the grid.
So where is that solar roadway actually, though?
Right in front of City Hall.
That stretched end to end in front of City Hall.
No, it's not end to end. The technology doesn't require it to be end to end
Okay.
anymore. In fact, it doesn't even need to stretch across the entire travel lane.
Huh.
It's narrow enough that basically the wheels are on each side of the solar, panel, the solar field. But it's the first time that it's done without having to have the grid supplement power. And so they're testing how effective a standalone solar field would be with a standalone charger. First time in North America it's been done. It's being done by a French company, Roadway. And so we're on the radar screen of this industry. Well, this RFP is for us to throw out to the electric vehicle charging industry an opportunity that if they come back to the city and offer up basically a program to encourage electric vehicle usage, or maybe new users of electric vehicles, and make it easy for electric vehicle charging to take place, so on and so forth, that will get more people to do it, and they will have a, if you want to call it, a special relationship with the city that maybe those who did not come up with a good comprehensive program wouldn't have. So it's essentially like we're saying, look, all of you companies that are in this industry, come back to us with a comprehensive program that'll help everybody from in-house charging to commercial, the whole thing. Make it good for our citizens. And if you do, we will make sure that you are, you are sitting at a special place at the table with the city.
This is it's good to see the city's doing all this. It really makes me feel like there is a smart city, and not only one area of the city, that tech park part, but that we're expanding it further out into the city.
Yep.
So good to see that. We've hit our time together. I think we've covered quite a bit, actually. And it's always good to have you on, Brian. So I just want to say thank you to you, to everyone else that's listening. Is there anything else that you may want to share that we didn't hit on? Or
no, you always do a good job of getting ready to talk about the important stuff. So no, that's it. And again, I just always want to thank you for providing yet another venue for people to get information. We can never hit everybody because people get it different ways, and you provide another way to get to people that we may not be able to get information to if you didn't do this. So thanks.
Well, I appreciate you always making yourself available to us. And to everyone that's watching, you're probably watching this either as a live simulcast, both on Facebook and YouTube, or as maybe on demand watching it. So feel free, share it with your friends, like us on Facebook to get these notifications. Go to our YouTube channel, just search Peachtree Corners Life, and you'll find the YouTube channel there, because we're beginning to do a live simulcast of these broadcasts on 2 channels of our social media. And they're usually done after we do the live recording. But you can put your comments in, try to get answers back to you depending on your questions. But feel free, again, share this with your friends, like us, leave a review if you're listening to this as a podcast on Apple, iTunes, iHeart, Spotify. Leave a review there as well. It helps us also.